They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but in high society it's served with vintage champagne and a crowd of witnesses. Alistair Sterling walked into the most exclusive royal gala of the decade, gripping the hand of his 22-year-old mistress, convinced he was the untouchable king of London's financial district. He thought his ex-wife Genevieve was crying in a studio apartment somewhere broken and forgotten. He was wrong, dead wrong. When the curtains lifted, Alistair didn't just realize he had lost. He realized he had walked voluntarily into his own execution. Stay tuned, because you are about to witness the most brutal, elegant takedown in the history of the elite. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, delivered not by post, but by a private courier in a charcoal-grey Bentley. It was a heavy thing, thick cream cardstock, edged in genuine 24-carat gold leaf, sealed with black wax that bore no crest, only the silhouette of a single thorny rose. Alistair Sterling. The 45-year-old CEO of Sterling & Co. Capital held it up to the light of his penthouse office in the Shard, London. The city sprawled beneath him, grey and submissive, much like he preferred his opponents. "Who is it from, Ali?" The voice came from the chaise lounge in the corner. Tiffany Rose, his mistress-turned fiancée, looked up from her phone. She was 23, stunning in that perfectly manufactured Instagram way, with hair the colour of spun platinum and lips that had cost more than Alistair's first car. She was the trophy he had blown up his life to acquire, the reason he had served divorce papers to Genevieve 3 years ago. The Obsidian Gala. Alistair read a smirk curling the corner of his mouth. Hosted at the Kensington Palace Orangery. Theme Resurrection. Tiffany squealed, scrambling off the lounge. The Obsidian Gala, Ali, are you serious? That's the most secretive event on the calendar. The press says even the darker branches of the Rothschilds struggle to get tickets. Who invited us? Alistair tossed the invitation onto his mahogany desk, leaning back with the casual arrogance of a man who had just shorted the housing market and won. Does it matter? My name has been in the Financial Times for 3 weeks straight since the merger with Blackwood Tech. Someone obviously wants the man of the hour to add some gravity to their little party. He walked over to the window, staring at his reflection. He looked good. Expensive suit jawline, sharpened by personal trainers, the glint of a Patek Philippe watch on his wrist. 3 years ago, life had been different. He had been married to Genevieve, sweet, quiet, boring Genevieve. She was a librarian's daughter he'd met in university. She wore sensible shoes, cooked pot roast on Sundays, and supported him when he was a nobody. But when Alistair hit his first 10 million, Genevieve stopped making sense. She didn't fit the yacht. She didn't fit the image. She was an anchor when he wanted to be a sail. So he cut her loose. The divorce was brutal. He had the better lawyers, sharks from Slaughter and May, and he had left her with a pittance. The last time he saw her, she was wearing a faded wool coat, signing the papers with a shaking hand in a rain-slicked parking lot. She looked grey, washed out, finished. "I wonder who the host is," Tiffany chirped, already scrolling through designer dresses on her iPad. "They say it changes every year. Last year it was rumoured to be a Saudi prince. Do you think we'll meet royalty?" "We are the royalty, Tiff," Alistair said, pouring himself a scotch. "But yes, we'll go, and we'll make sure everyone knows exactly who we are. Buy the most expensive dress you can find. I want you to shine so bright you blind them." He didn't know it yet, but the resurrection theme wasn't a metaphor for the economy. It was a promise. That night, Alistair lay in bed, the invitation glowing on the nightstand under the street lamp's light. He felt a strange unease, a tiny prickle at the base of his neck. The wax seal, the thorny rose. It reminded him of something. Genevieve used to grow roses. Black baccara roses. But he shook the thought away. Genevieve was probably teaching piano lessons in some damp village in the Cotswolds, aging gracefully into obscurity. She was the past. The obsidian gala was his future. The evening of the gala. London was draped in a suffocating fog. But the grounds of Kensington Palace were ablaze with light. A line of Rolls-Royces and Maybachs stretched down the private drive, idling silently as they deposited the crème de la crème of European society onto the red carpet. The paparazzi were kept at a distance behind velvet ropes and iron gates, their flashbulbs popping like distant lightning. Inside the back of his limousine, Alistair adjusted his silk bow tie. He wore a tuxedo custom-made on Savile Row, the midnight blue fabric hugging his frame perfectly. Beside him, Tiffany Rose was vibrating with anxiety and excitement. She was wearing a dress that left very little to the imagination, a sheer crystal-encrusted gown by Versace that clung to her like a second skin. It was beautiful, undeniably, but it was loud. It screamed, "Look at me." "Ali, look," she whispered, peering out the tinted window. "That's Sebastian Thorne, the shipping magnate. And oh my God, is that Lady Victoria Hervey?" "Calm down," Alistair snapped, though his own heart was beating a little faster. "You belong here. Act like it." The driver opened the door. The cool night air hit them, smelling of damp earth and expensive perfume. Alistair stepped out, extending a hand to Tiffany. As she emerged, the distant cameras went into a frenzy. They walked the carpet. Alistair held his head high, his chest puffed out. He scanned the crowd ahead. He saw heavy hitters, people he usually had to wait months to get a meeting with. There was Senator Julian Blackwood from the States, speaking in hushed tones with a Russian oligarch. There was the editor-in-chief of Vogue, looking imperious in black velvet. But as they moved toward the entrance of the orangery, Alistair noticed something strange. The atmosphere wasn't festive. It was tense, expectant. People were whispering. Groups of socialites huddled together, glancing at their phones, and then toward the massive closed doors of the ballroom. "Did you hear?" A woman in front of them whispered to her companion. She was the wife of a major banking rival. "They say the host has returned from Paris. They say she's bought the Van Dorn estate." "Impossible," the man replied. "That estate hasn't been sold in 2 centuries. Alistair frowned. The Van Dorn estate. That was old money, ancient money. The kind of money that looked at his hedge fund billions as cute. "Ali, why is everyone staring at us?" Tiffany whispered, squeezing his arm. Alistair looked around. She was right. As they moved through the foyer, heads turned. But the looks weren't the usual mix of envy and lust he got when he walked in with Tiffany. They were looks of confusion, amusement, and most unsettling of all, pity. "They're staring because you're the most beautiful woman here." Alistair lied, steering her toward the champagne waiter. He grabbed a flute of Dom Perignon and downed it in one gulp. "Mr. Sterling," a voice drawled from his left. Alistair turned to see Benedict Cumberbatch. No, not the actor, but Benedict St. John, a vicious corporate litigator known as the Butcher of Fleet Street. "Benedict." Alistair nodded. "Good to see you. You know my fiancée, Tiffany." Benedict's eyes flicked over Tiffany's sheer dress, for a fraction of a second his expression unreadable. He didn't greet her. He looked back at Alistair. "Brave choice, Alistair. Bringing her here, Tonight of all nights. Alistair bristled. And why is that? It's a party, Benedict, not a funeral. Benedict swirled his drink, a small, cruel smile playing on his lips. Is it? I suppose that depends on who is holding the shovel. Enjoy the evening, Sterling. He walked away, leaving a trail of cold air behind him. What a jerk, Tiffany scoffed. He's just jealous. Alistair didn't answer. The unease from the invitation was back, gripping his stomach like a cold hand. He looked around the room again. The decor was stunning, thousands of black roses suspended from the ceiling, black velvet drapes and chandeliers dripping with dark crystals. It was beautiful, but it felt gothic, predatory. The lights suddenly dimmed. A hush fell over the room. 300 of the world's most powerful people fell silent instantly. A spotlight hit the balcony overlooking the ballroom floor. Ladies and gentlemen, a voice boomed over the speakers. Please welcome your hostess for the evening, the chairwoman of the Van Dorn Trust and the newly appointed Duchess of Montclair. Alistair froze. Duchess Montclair. That title had been dormant for 50 years. The double doors on the balcony opened slowly. A figure stepped out. She was wearing a gown of emerald green velvet that flowed around her like liquid money. It was conservative, high-necked, long-sleeved, yet it oozed a sensuality and power that Tiffany's naked crystal dress couldn't hope to match. She wore a diamond choker that Alistair recognized from a Christie's auction catalogue it had sold for $20 million last month. Her hair, once mousy brown, was now a rich dark chestnut, swept up in an intricate chignon, revealing a neck as graceful as a swan's. She stepped to the railing and looked down at the crowd. Her eyes scanned the room, cold and sharp as cut glass. Alistair dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing in the silence. Tiffany gasped. "Ali, what are you doing?" But Alistair couldn't hear her. He couldn't breathe. He felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. The woman on the balcony wasn't a stranger. She wasn't a random duchess. It was Genevieve. But it wasn't the Genevieve he had divorced. This wasn't the woman who clipped coupons and wore sensible wool. This woman radiated a terrifying, regal authority. She looked down her gaze, sweeping over the sea of faces until it locked onto him. She didn't smile. She didn't flinch. She just stared, her eyes boring into him with a mixture of amusement and absolute crushing indifference. "Welcome," Genevieve said, her voice amplified, smooth and rich like dark chocolate. "To the resurrection." Alistair's knees buckled. She's the host, his mind screamed. My ex-wife is the queen of the Gala. And he had just walked into her palace holding the hand of his mistress. The shattering of Alistair's champagne glass was the only sound in the room for a heartbeat. Then the whispers started again, but this time they were a roar. "Is that Genevieve Sterling? No, you fool, that's Genevieve Van Dorn, the granddaughter of the late Archduchess Eleanor." I thought the line ended in 1950. Apparently not. She's the sole heir. Everything. The estates in France, the shipping lines, the art collection. Alistair stood frozen champagne soaking into his Italian leather shoes. His brain was misfiring, trying to reconcile two impossible images. There was the Genevieve he knew. The woman who clipped coupons for laundry detergent. The woman who wore oversized sweaters and read paperback mysteries on the couch. The woman he had called uninspiring to his divorce lawyer. He remembered the day he told her he was leaving. She had been watering her small, sad window box of plants. She hadn't screamed. She had just looked at him with wet, devastating eyes and asked, Is there no chance for us, Alistair? Not even for the sake of 10 years. He had laughed, a cruel, dismissive laugh. 10 years is a sunk cost, Jen. I'm moving forward. You're stationary. And now he watched as Genevieve began to descend the grand marble staircase. She didn't walk. She floated. The heavy emerald velvet of her gown rippled around her. Every step was calculated regal. The crowd parted for her instantly, a sea of billionaires and aristocrats bowing their heads in deference. "Ali," Tiffany hissed, tugging violently on his sleeve. "Ali, people are looking at the wet spot on the floor. Do something, and who is that woman? Why is she staring at you?" "Shut up," Alistair whispered, his voice trembling. "Just shut up, Tiffany." He couldn't take his eyes off his ex-wife. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, a man stepped forward to take her hand. It was Julian Blackwood, the senator Alistair had been desperate to meet. The senator bowed low, kissing her gloved knuckles, with a reverence Alistair had never seen him show anyone. "Alistair, you look like you've seen a ghost," a dry voice murmured beside him. Alistair turned. It was Lord Evelyn Carlyle, an old money power broker who sat on the board of the Bank of England. Alistair had been trying to get a lunch meeting with him for 5 years. "Lord Carlyle," Alistair choked out. Do you know her?" Carlyle took a sip of his martini, watching Genevieve with admiration. "Everyone knows her now, old boy. It's the story of the century. The hidden Duchess. Hidden. Her grandmother was the exiled Archduchess who fled Europe during the war," Carlyle explained, enjoying Alistair's visible confusion. "She married a commoner, a librarian, and renounced her titles to protect her family. They lived in total obscurity. Genevieve didn't know, not until her grandmother passed away 2 years ago. 2 years ago. Just months after their divorce was finalized." "She inherited the title?" Alistair asked, his mouth dry. "The title, yes. But more importantly, the trust. The Van Dorn Trust has been accumulating compound interest and assets since the 1800s. It's not just money, Sterling. It's sovereignty. She could buy your little hedge fund out of petty cash and still have enough left over to purchase a small country." Alistair felt the room spin. When he had divorced her, he had fought tooth and nail to keep his $3 million fortune intact. He had given her the minimum alimony allowed by law, arguing that she had no marketable skills. She was now worth billions. "She's been in Paris," Carlyle continued, "being groomed, learning the ropes, reclaiming her heritage. This gala is her coming-out party. It's her declaring that the Van Dorn line is back." Alistair looked back at Genevieve. She was laughing softly at something the senator said, a sound he recognized, but sharper, more guarded. She was radiant. She was powerful. And she was wearing the family heirloom he had forced her to sell. He squinted. "Yes." Around her neck, nestled above the diamonds, was a small, simple silver locket. It looked out of place amongst the millions of dollars of jewelry, but she wore it proudly. When they were married, Genevieve had told him it was the only thing she had from her mother. When Alistair's first business venture nearly failed in 2018, he had demanded she sell it to cover a margin call. She had cried for days. He had forced her to the pawn shop himself. How did she get it back? "Ali," Tiffany whined, her voice grating on his nerves like sandpaper. "I want to meet her. She's the host, right? We should go say hi. Maybe she'll like my dress." Alistair looked at Tiffany, at the gaudy crystals, the fake tan, the desperate need for attention. Then he looked at Genevieve, cool, understated, commanding. He had traded a diamond for a rhinestone. "No," Alistair said, panic rising in his throat. "We're leaving. Now." "What, no?" Tiffany stomped her foot. "I spent 4 hours getting ready. I want a selfie with the Duchess." Before Alistair could grab her arm, the crowd shifted. The pathway cleared, and suddenly there was nothing between Alistair Sterling and Genevieve Van Dorn but 10 feet of polished marble floor. Genevieve stopped mid-sentence. She turned slowly, her eyes locking onto Alistair. The senator stepped back. The room seemed to hold its breath. She didn't look away. She smiled. It was a terrifying, beautiful smile that didn't reach her eyes. She began to walk toward him. The walk felt like an eternity. Every click of her heels on the marble echoed like a gunshot in Alistair's ears. He wanted to run, but his legs were lead. He straightened his spine, trying to summon the arrogance that usually carried him through boardroom hostile takeovers. "I am Alistair Sterling," he told himself. "I am a self-made man." But as Genevieve drew closer, he felt small. She stopped 2 feet away from him. The scent of her perfume hit him. Black baccarat rose and cold rain. It was intoxicating. "Alistair," she said. Her voice was calm, devoid of the tremor he used to hear when she was nervous. "Genevieve," he nodded, his voice tight. "You look different." "I imagine I do," she replied smoothly. "A lot can change in 3 years. Wouldn't you agree?" Her eyes flickered to Tiffany, who was standing slightly behind Alistair, clutching her clutch bag and looking between them with wide, confused eyes. "And this must be Tiffany," Genevieve said. There was no malice in her tone, only a polite curiosity, as if she were examining a mildly interesting insect. "I recognize you from the tabloids. The Instagram model, isn't it?" Tiffany puffed up, mistaking the recognition for a compliment. "Yes, hi." "Oh my God, you're the Duchess. Your dress is amazing, but it's so covered up. Don't you get hot?" Alistair closed his eyes. "Please stop talking." Genevieve's smile didn't waver. "We value mystery in the Van Dorn family, Tiffany. We find that giving everything away at first glance leaves nothing for the imagination. A lesson you might find valuable." The insult was so elegant that it took Tiffany 5 seconds to process it. By the time her mouth fell open, Genevieve had already turned her attention back to Alistair. "I'm surprised to see you here, Alistair," she said. "The vetting process for the guest list was quite rigorous. Usually we filter out liabilities." Alistair bristled. "Liability Sterling and Co. just merged with Blackwood Tech. We posted record profits last quarter. I'm hardly a liability, Jen." "It's your grace," a deep voice rumbled from behind Genevieve. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped up beside her. He was younger than Alistair, perhaps 35, with eyes like flint and a scar running through his left eyebrow. He wore a military dress uniform with medals pinned to his chest. He looked like a bodyguard, but he carried himself like a prince. "It's all right, Stefan," Genevieve said, placing a calming hand on the man's forearm. The gesture was intimate, familiar. Alistair felt a spike of jealousy hot enough to burn. Alistair is still adjusting to the new reality. She looked back at Alistair, her gaze sharpening. "And regarding your record profits, Alistair, I wouldn't be so sure. I was reading the due diligence reports on Blackwood Tech this morning." Alistair froze. "Due diligence, why would you be reading that?" Genevieve tilted her head. Oh, didn't you know the merger was funded by a private equity injection? A shadow partner? Yes, Alistair said, sweating now. The Obsidian Group. Silent investors. Genevieve spread her hands, the emerald velvet catching the light. Welcome to the Obsidian Gala, Alistair. Who do you think owns the Obsidian Group? The blood drained from Alistair's face. The world tilted on its axis. You, he whispered. You funded the merger. I own 51% of the debt, Genevieve corrected softly. Which means, technically, I own you. She took a step closer, invading his personal space. For the first time, her mask slipped, and he saw a flash of the fire beneath. You told me once that I was a burden, Alistair. You told me I didn't understand the value of money. So I decided to learn. I bought your debt not because it was a good investment, though it is, but because I wanted to be the one holding the leash when you inevitably stumble. I don't stumble, Alistair snarled, though his confidence was shattering. Everyone stumbles, Genevieve whispered, especially when they are looking at the stars and forget the cliff beneath their feet. She pulled back her mask of icy politeness, sliding back into place. Enjoy the party, Alistair. Drink the champagne. It's vintage 1959. Very expensive. But do try not to spill any more of it. We hate to ruin the floors. She turned her back on him. Come, Stefan. The Prime Minister is waiting. She walked away, the man named Stefan, placing a protective hand on the small of her back. Alistair was left standing in the center of the room, vibrating with shock. Tiffany was tugging at his arm again. Ali, what did she mean? She owns you, Ali. Is she rich? Ali, people are laughing at us. Alistair looked around. They weren't laughing. They were worse. They were ignoring him. The circle had closed. He was on the outside. And Genevieve was the queen. But Alistair Sterling was a fighter. He had clawed his way up from the gutter to the penthouse. He wasn't going to let his ex-wife, librarian, or duchess destroy him. His eyes narrowed as he watched her laugh with the Prime Minister. She thinks she's won, he muttered to himself. She has no idea. Alistair retreated to the shadows of the arched colonnade, his knuckles white as he gripped a fresh glass of whiskey. His mind was racing a chaotic storm of denial and fury. She owns the debt. The words echoed in his head. If Genevieve called in the loan on the Obsidian Group merger, Sterling and Co. would be insolvent within 24 hours. He would lose the penthouse, the cars, the status. He would be back to where he started, a scholarship kid from Leeds with nothing but ambition. He watched Genevieve across the room. She was holding court near the orchestra, laughing softly at something the French ambassador said. Stefan, the scarred military man, stood just behind her shoulder, a silent, lethal shadow. She's bluffing, Alistair muttered to himself. She has to be. Genevieve doesn't have the stomach for corporate warfare. She cries when she steps on a snail. He needed leverage. He needed to remind everyone in this room that he was the businessman and she was just a lucky ex-wife playing dress-up. He scanned the room and spotted Benedict St. John near the ice sculpture. Benedict was a shark, but he was a shark who hated instability. If Alistair could convince him that Genevieve was erratic, an inexperienced heir who would crash the market, Benedict might rally the board against her. Alistair straightened his tie and marched over. Benedict, Alistair hissed, leaning in close. We need to talk. This circus, it's a threat to the market. Benedict raised an eyebrow, peeling a shrimp with surgical precision. I find it quite refreshing, actually. The Duchess has excellent taste in catering. She's a fraud, Benedict. Alistair snapped, his voice rising slightly. 3 years ago, she was clipping coupons. She doesn't know the first thing about private equity. If she holds the debt on the Blackwood merger, she's going to mishandle it. She'll tank the stock just to sack me. You have shares in Blackwood, too. Do you want to lose millions because of a bitter ex-wife's vendetta? Benedict paused. He looked at Genevieve, then back at Alistair. The greed in his eyes flickered. What are you proposing, Sterling? We force a vote of no confidence. Alistair said, his confidence returning. I have a file. Old tax returns from our marriage, joint filings. There were discrepancies, things I managed for her. If I release them, it will look like she was involved in tax evasion before she inherited the title. It will scandalize the trust. The board will have to remove her control to protect the Van Dorn image. It was a lie, of course. Alistair was the one who had fudged the numbers years ago, hiding assets in the Cayman Islands. But Genevieve had signed the joint returns without looking. She was legally implicated. It was mutually assured destruction, but Alistair bet that she had more to lose now than he did. Benedict studied him for a long moment. Then a slow, cold smile spread across his face. You're a vicious bastard, Alistair. I'm a businessman, Alistair corrected. Are you in? If you can prove she's a liability, Benedict said softly. I'll back your motion at the shareholder meeting tomorrow morning. I won't wait for tomorrow, Alistair said, a dark plan forming. I'm going to do it now. The toast. When she gets up to speak, I'm going to ask the hard questions. I'm going to expose her past. By the time I'm done, these people will see her for what she really is, a fraud. He turned to find Tiffany. He needed her on his arm, a visual representation of his virility, and moving on. He found her by the chocolate fountain, taking a selfie with a bewildered-looking elderly countess. Tiffany, come here, Alistair commanded, grabbing her wrist a little too hard. Ouch, Ali, watch the nails, she complained, pulling away. I was networking, the Countess was telling me about her yacht. Forget the Countess. We're going to the stage. When I start talking, just stand there and look supportive. Smile. Nod. Do not speak. Why are you so sweaty? Tiffany asked, wrinkling her nose. You look manic. I am winning, Tiffany. That's what winning looks like. Suddenly the orchestra stopped playing. A drum roll echoed through the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed, please raise your glasses for the hostess's address. Genevieve stepped up to the microphone on the raised dais. The spotlight hit her, turning the emerald velvet to fire. She looked out over the crowd, serene and untouchable. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice steady. Tonight is about resurrection, about rising from the ashes of the past to build something stronger. Alistair downed the rest of his whiskey. He slammed the glass onto a passing waiter's tray. Now, he whispered. He pushed through the crowd, dragging Tiffany behind him. He wasn't going to let Genevieve finish her speech. He was going to burn her kingdom down before she even put on the crown. Ex-wife. Alistair's voice didn't just interrupt the speech. It shattered the atmosphere like a brick thrown through a stained glass window. He broke through the front line of the crowd, his breathing ragged, his face slick with a sheen of manic sweat. He marched right up to the base of the raised dais, standing in the pool of spotlight that was meant for Genevieve. Behind him, 300 of the world's most powerful people froze. The silence was instantaneous and absolute, the kind of heavy, suffocating quiet that precedes a natural disaster. Genevieve stopped mid-sentence. She looked down at him from the height of the stage, her face an unreadable mask of porcelain and ice. Beside her, Stefan, the scarred bodyguard, tensed. His hand moved instinctively toward the inside of his tuxedo jacket, his eyes locking onto Alistair with lethal intent. But Genevieve simply raised one gloved hand, a small, imperious gesture that stopped him in his tracks. "Alistair," she said into the microphone. Her voice was amplified, booming through the cavernous orangery, smooth and rich. "I see you've been enjoying the 1959 vintage. Perhaps security should call you a car. You seem unwell." "Don't patronize me, Jen," Alistair shouted, his voice cracking. He pointed a shaking finger at her, the gold cufflink gleaming under the lights. "You're playing a game you don't understand. You think a fancy dress and a stolen title make you one of them." He spun around to face the crowd, spreading his arms wide, performing for the audience he was desperate to win over. "Look at her," he bellowed, gesturing back at the stage. "You all think she's some aristocratic savior. You're bowing to a fraud. 3 years ago, this woman was begging me for grocery money. She's a librarian from Leeds who got lucky with a genealogy test. She doesn't belong here." The crowd murmured. It was an awkward ripple of sound, the rustle of silk and the shifting of weight. This was high society. Dirty laundry was supposed to be aired in courtrooms, not at galas. "Is there a point to this outburst, Alistair?" Genevieve asked. She didn't look embarrassed. She didn't look angry. She looked bored. As if he were a tedious commercial break she was forced to endure. "The point," Alistair sneered, turning back to face her, "is that you are unfit to manage the Van Dorn Trust. You are unfit to hold the debt of Sterling & Co. I know about the tax filings, Genevieve. The 2019 returns." He saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Fear. Yes, it had to be fear. He pressed his advantage, his voice rising to a fever pitch. "I have the documents." Alistair lied, his bluff growing in magnitude. "I know you signed off on illegal asset hiding in the Caymans. You're a criminal just like the rest of us. So why don't you step down, void the debt, and go back to your books before I hand everything over to the authorities right now?" He stood there, panting, waiting for her to crumble. He waited for the tears, the apologies, the submission. But silence stretched out. 5 seconds. 10. Tiffany rose, standing a few feet behind Alistair, tugged at his sleeve. Her face was pale beneath her spray tan. "Ali, stop," she whispered urgently. "Everyone is looking at us like we're crazy. Let's just go." "Quiet, Tiffany," Alistair hissed. "I'm saving us." Genevieve sighed. It was a sound of deep, profound disappointment, amplified by the speakers for everyone to hear. "You brought up the 2019 returns, Alistair," she said, her tone shifting from polite to clinical. "I'm actually glad you did. It saves me the trouble of bringing them up myself." She looked over Alistair's head toward the tech booth at the back of the room. She gave a single sharp nod. Behind her, the massive LED screen that had been displaying the elegant logo of the Obsidian Gala flickered. The image dissolved. In its place, a high-resolution PDF document appeared. Alistair squinted against the glare. It was a bank transfer record. "When I inherited the trust," Genevieve said, addressing the crowd now as if she were giving a university lecture, "my first act was to hire forensic accountants, the best in London. I wanted to ensure my financial history was spotless before I took the helm." The document on the screen zoomed in a red circle, highlighting a specific line item. "We found the money you hid, Alistair," she said softly. £2.5 million, siphoned from our joint account into a shell company in the Cayman Islands. That proves nothing, Alistair shouted, though his stomach lurched. You signed those papers. It's your name on the account. Is it? Genevieve asked. The screen changed again. This time, it showed two signatures side by side. One was Genevieve's elegant looping script. The other was a jagged, shaky imitation. Below them, bold text read, Handwriting Analysis Report. Match probability, 0.0%. Confirmed forgery. Alistair thought I was too stupid to notice the money missing. Genevieve continued, her voice hardening into steel. He told me the market was down. He told me we had to tighten our belts. And while I was clipping coupons, he was practicing my signature to embezzle funds to prop up his own failing stock prices. No, Alistair croaked. He looked around the room. Senator Blackwood was whispering to the Russian oligarch. Lord Carlisle was shaking his head. That's fake. She forged the report. And this, Genevieve said, ignoring him completely, is a recording from the executive boardroom of Sterling & Co. dated exactly 3 days ago. A crackle of static hissed through the speakers. Then Alistair's own voice boomed out, crystal clear, undeniable. I don't care if the figures are real. Benedict, just cook the books and get the merger done. If the audit comes up short, we'll blame it on the transition team. I need that payout to cover the ring for Tiffany. If Genevieve finds out I'm leveraging the debt, I'm dead. Just get it done. The gasp from the room sucked the air out of the orangery. This wasn't just social drama anymore. This was a confession of securities fraud. Alistair stumbled back as if he had been physically struck. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking grey and old. He felt the eyes of every investor, every rival, every prosecutor in the room burning into his skin. You... Alistair choked, looking up at her with horror. You tapped my office. I own the building, Alistair, Genevieve said simply. I bought the lease last week. Landlord's prerogative. She stepped to the very edge of the stage. She looked down at him, and for the first time he realized just how small he was. You wanted a reaction, Alistair. You wanted to prove you were the powerful businessman. Well, here is the business reality. Your stock is currently in free fall. The Securities and Exchange Commission has already been sent a copy of this recording. And the debt I hold... She paused, letting the silence stretch until it was agonizing. I'm calling it in. Immediately. Alistair fell to his knees. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. His legs simply gave out. You can't. I'll be bankrupt. You are already bankrupt, Genevieve whispered. You just didn't know it yet. Alistair looked frantically to his right. Tiff, he pleaded, reaching out for her hand. Tiff, baby, tell them. Tell them it's a lie. We can fix this. Tiffany Rose looked at the screen where the evidence of his crimes was still glowing. She looked at the furious, disgusted faces of the billionaires around them. Then she looked at Alistair, sweaty, ruined, and pathetic on the floor. She yanked her hand away as if he were contagious. Don't touch me! She shrieked, her voice shrill and piercing. She clawed at her left hand, ripping the massive diamond engagement ring off her finger. You said you were rich. You said you owned the city. You used my credit card to pay for the limo tonight, didn't you? You liar. Tiffany, wait. I'm done. She threw the ring with all her might. It bounced off Alistair's chest, a pathetic clink, and rolled across the marble floor, coming to a stop at Genevieve's feet. I'm not going to jail for you. I'm single. Tiffany turned and ran toward the exit, her heels clicking frantically, clutching her purse to her chest. Alistair was left alone in the center of the room. The circle of elite society had widened, leaving him isolated on an island of humiliation. He looked up at Genevieve, tears of rage and shock stinging his eyes. "Why?" he whispered, his voice broken. "Why do this here? Why not just sue me quietly?" Genevieve leaned into the mic one last time. Her eyes were dark, devoid of pity. "Because, Alistair, you didn't just break my heart. You tried to break my dignity. You made me feel small so you could feel big. You loved the audience, didn't you?" She signaled to the security guards waiting in the wings. "Now, you know how it feels to be the entertainment." Two burly guards crossed the floor, grabbing Alistair by the arms. He didn't fight. He went limp, too shocked to struggle. As they dragged him backward across the polished floor, his heels skidding, he saw Stefan step up to Genevieve and hand her a fresh glass of champagne. She took a sip, watching him over the rim of the glass. The heavy oak doors slammed shut, sealing Alistair outside in the cold fog. Inside the ballroom, silence hung for one heartbeat. Then Senator Blackwood started to clap. It was a slow, respectful applause. Then Lord Carlisle joined in. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding. They weren't clapping for the drama. They were clapping for the Queen. 3 months later. The London rain was relentless, a grey curtain that seemed to wash the colour out of the world. It hammered against the small, reinforced window of cell 402 in Wandsworth Prison, the sound echoing like a constant, mocking applause. Alistair Sterling sat on the edge of his cot, the thin mattress sagging under his weight. The man who had once commanded boardrooms from the top of the Shard now commanded nothing but a 4-by-8-foot concrete box. The bespoke Savile Row suits were a distant memory, replaced by a scratchy, ill-fitting grey uniform that smelled faintly of industrial bleach and other men's despair. His Patek Philippe, the one he used to check impatiently during million-dollar negotiations, sat in an evidence locker somewhere in the city. Time, once his most valuable currency, now stretched out before him in an agonizing, endless loop. He stared at the peeling paint on the opposite wall. The headlines were likely still circulating, though the guards rarely let him see a paper. Sterling Silver turns to rust. CEO sentenced to 12 years for fraud. The shame burned in his gut, hotter than the cheap instant coffee they served at breakfast. Everything was gone. The penthouse overlooking the Thames had been seized. The Aston Martin had been auctioned. Even his friends had evaporated like mist. He had used his one allowed phone call to try and reach Tiffany Rose, desperate for a familiar voice, a shred of loyalty. The line had been dead. 2 weeks later, his court-appointed solicitor, an overworked man with a stain on his tie, had dropped a tabloid on the table. There was Tiffany beaming on the cover of The Sun, hanging off the arm of a 20-year-old Premier League striker. The headline read, "My Nightmare with the Monster of Mayfair, How Alistair Duped Me." She had sold her story for £50 and £1,000. It was enough to buy a lot of handbags, but not enough to buy Alistair's dignity back. But it wasn't the loss of the money or the girl that haunted him in the silence of the night. It was the memory of the gala. It was Genevieve. He closed his eyes and saw her standing on that stage, bathed in emerald light. He had expected her to scream. He had prepared himself for a woman scorned, hysterical and bitter. He could have fought that. He knew how to fight anger. But he hadn't known how to fight indifference. She hadn't looked at him with hate. She had looked at him like he was a rounding error in a ledger, something to be corrected and forgotten. Sterling. The sharp rap of a baton against the iron bars made him jump. A guard stood there, face impassive. "Visitor. Lawyer's room. Move it." Alistair stood, his knees cracking. A flicker of hope ignited in his chest, desperate and illogical. Maybe the appeal had gone through. Maybe the board had found a technicality. Maybe there was a way out. He shuffled down the corridor, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. When he entered the visitor's room, he expected the stained tie of his public defender. Instead, he stopped dead. Sitting on the other side of the reinforced glass partition was Benedict St. John. Benedict looked impeccable as always. He wore a navy pinstripe suit that probably cost more than the prison guard made in a year. He was checking his gold pocket watch, an air of supreme boredom on his face. Alistair sat down, slowly picking up the black receiver phone. "Benedict, you came." Benedict picked up his receiver, his expression unreadable. "Alistair, you look tired." "Man, I've been better," Alistair said, a ragged laugh escaping him. "Why are you here? Is there news? Did the shareholders rally?" Benedict offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was the smile of a shark that had already eaten. "I'm not here to help you, Alistair. I'm here as a messenger." "A messenger?" "For the new ownership," Benedict clarified smoothly. "We finalized the restructuring of Sterling & Co. this morning. The brand is dead, of course. Toxic assets, but the infrastructure was valuable." "Who bought it?" Alistair demanded, gripping the phone tighter. "Who picked over the bones?" Benedict reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. He slid it through the narrow slot at the bottom of the glass. It was heavy, expensive paper, sealed with black wax, stamped with a single thorny rose. "The Van Dorn Trust," Benedict said softly. "She bought it all, Alistair. Every share, every debt. She liquidated your personal assets to pay back the pension fund you raided. She made the employees whole. And then she dissolved the company into her charitable division." Alistair's hands shook uncontrollably as he tore open the wax seal. Inside was a single photograph. It wasn't a legal document. It wasn't a check. It was a picture of a grimy, run-down storefront in a bad part of London. The pawn shop. The place where years ago Alistair had forced a weeping Genevieve to sell her mother's silver locket to cover a margin call he had panicked over. He flipped the photo over. On the back, in elegant, sweeping handwriting that he knew better than his own, were 3 words: "Paid in full." The air left Alistair's lungs. She remembered. She remembered every slight, every moment of cruelty, and she had systematically balanced the scales. She owns me," Alistair whispered, the reality crashing down on him. "She erased you," Benedict corrected, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "You aren't a rival anymore. You aren't even a memory. You're just a footnote in the quarterly report of a much more successful woman." Benedict turned to the door, signaling the guard. "Wait," Alistair shouted, slamming his hand against the glass. "How is she, Benedict? Does she ask about me? Does she mention my name?" Benedict paused, his hand on the doorknob. He looked back at the broken man in the grey uniform, a look of pity mixed with disdain on his face. "She doesn't speak of you at all, Alistair," Benedict said coldly. "You are the past, and Genevieve. She is too busy building the future." The door clicked shut, leaving Alistair alone in the silence, clutching the photo of his own sins. The French Riviera. 1,000 miles away, the world was a different color entirely. The sun was beginning its slow descent over the Mediterranean, painting the sky in strokes of violet and burning orange. The air here didn't smell of rain and concrete. It smelled of wild lavender sea salt and ancient pine. Genevieve stood on the limestone terrace of the Villa Van Dorn, a sprawling estate perched high on the cliffs overlooking the glittering lights of Monaco. She was barefoot, the cold stone grounding her. The heavy armoured velvet gowns and the diamond chokers of the Gala were packed away. Tonight, she wore a simple white linen sundress that caught the breeze, her hair loose and waving around her shoulders. She took a sip of chilled rosé, the condensation on the glass cool against her fingertips. She looked out at the horizon, where the sea met the sky. The last 3 months had been a blur of lawyers, press conferences, and signatures. Dismantling Alistair's empire hadn't been done out of spite, not entirely. It was a necessary exorcism. She had needed to take the weapon he used to hurt her and turn it into something that could heal others. The sterling assets were now funding housing for displaced families. The cycle of greed was broken. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the sweet air. For 10 years she had held her breath, waiting for permission to exist, waiting for Alistair to tell her she was good enough. "You're thinking too loud," a deep, familiar voice rumbled from the doorway. Genevieve turned, a genuine smile touching her lips. Stefan stood there, leaning against the archway. He had shed his formal military dress for a relaxed white shirt. Sleeves rolled up to reveal the scars and tattoos on his forearms. He held a platter of fresh figs and cheese. "I'm not thinking," Genevieve corrected softly. "I'm remembering." "Remembering what?" Stefan asked, setting the platter on a mosaic table and moving to stand beside her at the railing. "The girl I used to be," she admitted, looking down at the waves crashing against the rocks far below. "The one who clipped coupons and apologized for taking up space. I wish I could go back and tell her. I wish I could tell her that the pain was just the forging fire." Stefan watched her, his dark eyes warm and steady. He had been her shadow for 2 years, her protector, her teacher, her only true friend in the shark tank of high society. He had seen her cry when she thought no one was looking, and he had seen her stand like a queen when the world was watching. "She knows," Stefan said, his voice low and rough. "She's the one who walked through the fire so you could stand here today." Genevieve looked up at him. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was charged. It was the comfortable silence of 2 people who no longer needed to hide who they were. "So," Stefan said, breaking the gaze to look out at the ocean. "The king is dethroned. The empire is conquered. London is at your feet. Your Grace, what is the next campaign?" Genevieve laughed, a light, free sound that carried on the wind. She reached up and touched the silver locket at her throat, the one she had bought back from the pawn shop herself the day the funds cleared. It was warm against her skin. "No more campaigns, Stefan," she whispered. "I'm tired of war. I'm tired of strategy." She turned fully toward him. The sun was dipping below the water now, casting long shadows across the terrace. "I think," she said, reaching out to take his hand. His palm was rough, calloused from years of service, but his touch was incredibly gentle. "I think it's time to start living. Just living." Stefan looked at their joined hands, then up into her eyes. The professional distance he had maintained for so long evaporated, replaced by a raw, honest devotion. "I'm with you," he promised, interlacing his fingers with hers. Every step of the way. Below them, the ocean continued its eternal rhythm, washing away the debris of the past. Genevieve squeezed his hand and turned back to the view her heart finally truly light. The nightmare was over. The Queen had not just survived, she had rewritten the ending. And for the first time in her life, the story wasn't about who she belonged to. It was about who she was. She was Genevieve Van Dorn. And she was free. And that is the story of how Alistair Sterling learned the hardest lesson of all. Never underestimate the person you broke, because pieces can be put back together into a weapon. Genevieve didn't just get revenge. She got justice. She proved that true power isn't about shouting the loudest or flashing the most cash. It's about patience, dignity, and playing the long game. If you enjoyed this story of karma and redemption, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. What did you think of Alistair's punishment? Was it enough, or did he deserve worse? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new episode of our dramatic storytelling. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.